The Galactic Academy xenobiology classroom fell silent as Professor Zethkar wheeled in the containment unit. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, something massive shifted in the shadows, scales catching the artificial light like obsidian mirrors. Today, class, we study the apex predators of Kepler 442b, the Vorthon instructor announced, his forearms gesturing dramatically. The Shadow Maw, a creature so feared that entire colonies have been abandoned at the mere sight of their ships. Mino Chen pressed her stylus against her tablet, making notes while trying to ignore the nervous chittering from her Quillen classmates. As the only human in the advanced xenobiology program, she'd grown accustomed to being the odd one out. Her friend James Morrison, seated 2 rows behind in the engineering track, caught her eye and rolled his shoulders in a subtle shrug that said, "Here we go again." "The hatchling you see before you," Professor Zethkar continued, "represents everything your species should fear about the deep galaxy. Retractable claws capable of shearing through ship hulls, electromagnetic sensory organs that can detect a heartbeat from 3 kilometers away. And most terrifying of all, the containment field flickered off. Chaos erupted. The Quillen's natural defense mechanisms triggered, filling the air with a cloud of paralytic spores. The crystalline Zeltharians resonated at frequencies that shattered 2 light fixtures. Even the normally composed Altarians began cycling through rapid color changes that indicated extreme distress. But the Shadow Maw hatchling, easily the size of an Earth tiger despite being barely past infancy, simply stepped out of its container with fluid grace. Its 6 legs moved in perfect synchronization, each step precise and purposeful. The creature's head swiveled on its serpentine neck, scanning the room with eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. "Nobody move!" Professor Zethkar shouted, reaching for the emergency beacon. "Security to Lab 7 immediately." The hatchling's attention fixed on something. It began moving through the chaos with predatory focus, ignoring the panicking students, as if they were mere obstacles. Several Quillens fainted as it passed within meters of their desks. Mino realized with growing dread that the creature was heading straight for her. "This is it," she thought, her hand instinctively moving to the small family photo in her pocket, a nervous habit she'd developed during her first year away from Earth. "I'm going to be the first human killed in an academic setting by an alien, apex predator. Mom's going to be so disappointed." The Shadow Maw hatchling reached her desk and reared up on its hind legs, bringing its massive head level with hers. This close, she could see every detail of its alien anatomy, the way its nostrils flared as it processed her scent, the subtle bioluminescent patterns along its neck that pulsed with its heartbeat, the rows of crystalline teeth that could probably bite through her torso without much effort. The creature's mouth opened, revealing that impressive dental array, and it made a sound that could only be described as a purr. The deep, rumbling vibration filled the sudden quiet of the classroom. The hatchling's massive head tilted to one side, and it gently bumped against Mino's shoulder with what could only be interpreted as affection. "What is happening?" Professor Zethkar whispered, his voice barely audible over the continued purring. Mino, acting on pure instinct, slowly raised her hand and placed it on the creature's scaled head. The purring intensified, and the Shadow Maw actually leaned into her touch, its eyes closing in apparent bliss. "I think," Mino said carefully, "it likes me." From across the room, James stood up slowly, his engineering-trained mind already working through the implications. "Professor, what do we know about Shadow Maw social structure?" They're pack hunters," Zethkar stammered. "Highly social, with complex hierarchical relationships based on—" He stopped, his eyes widening. Oh no. "Oh no, what?" several students asked in unison. James had reached the same conclusion. "It's imprinted on her. Mino, I think you're now officially part of a Shadow Maw pack." The hatchling seemed to sense the attention and lifted its head, fixing the class with a stare that had shifted from predatory to protective. A low growl rumbled in its throat as it positioned itself between Mino and the rest of the room. "Fascinating," Professor Zethkar breathed, his scientific curiosity overriding his terror. In over 3 centuries of xenobiology research, there has never been a recorded case of interspecies pack bonding with apex predators. The pheromone signatures alone should make this impossible. Mino scratched behind what she hoped was the equivalent of the creature's ear, earning another pleased rumble. Maybe that's because no one ever tried being nice to them first instead of immediately assuming they were monsters. The observation hung in the air like a challenge. Around the classroom, the other students, those who hadn't fled or fainted, began to reconsider everything they'd been taught about humanity's place in the galactic community. James grinned from his position near the door, where he'd been ready to mount a rescue attempt. Leave it to a human to accidentally adopt the galaxy's most feared predator as a pet. "It's not a pet," Mino protested, then paused as the hatchling butted against her hand for more attention. "It's a friend. Right, buddy?" The Shadow Maw's purr deepened to a contented rumble that vibrated through the floor. Later, after security had cordoned off the lab and xenobiology experts from across the sector had been contacted, Mino sat in the Academy's medical bay while doctors ran scan after scan. The hatchling, who she'd started calling Shade, refused to leave her side, much to everyone's continued amazement. "The neural pathway formations are unlike anything we've seen," Dr. Valen, the head of xenopsychology, explained to the gathering crowd of researchers. "The bond appears to be genuine and bilateral. The human's stress hormones have actually decreased since the initial contact, while the Shadow Maw's brain chemistry shows patterns consistent with contentment and security." "But how is this possible?" Professor Zethkar asked. "Humans are supposed to be mid-tier sophonts at best. They have no natural defenses, limited sensory capabilities, and their emotional responses are chaotic compared to more advanced species." James, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. "Maybe that's exactly why it works. We don't trigger their threat responses because we don't register as competition, and our chaotic emotions might actually be more similar to their natural social patterns than the rigid hierarchies of other species." Mino nodded, absently stroking Shade's neck as the young predator dozed beside her chair. "On Earth, some of our most successful relationships with other species came from understanding rather than domination. We didn't tame wolves by being stronger than them. We became part of their pack structure." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity, the species most of the galaxy considered barely worthy of associate membership in galactic civilization, had just achieved something that 3 millennia of advanced xenobiology had deemed impossible. "Well," Dr. Valen said finally, "I suppose we have a lot to learn about both humans and Shadow Maws." As if in response, Shade opened one massive eye, looked directly at the assembled crowd of researchers, and purred loud enough to rattle the medical equipment. Mino smiled. Sometimes being human in a galaxy full of superior species had its advantages.